Next patch is gonna bring us version 1.7, which is gonna be super freaking hype. But I figured that we can use this wee little lull period to talk about shields. Now, what's good, everyone? It's Worth here, and everyone knows that Watts4Dinner and Protean Cell are the two best shields, hands down. But today, we're gonna discuss why and what other alternatives are there if you wanna color outside of the lines of the meta. And if you want to help me round out my number as well, give this video a like and hit that sub button. It helps the channel and myself way more than you can ever imagine. Oh, and just before we begin, I know that I am a micro creator right now, but I want to roll out a new feature for the channel to get a little bit more of a communal sense. And that feature is voicemails. If you have any questions about builds, tactics, meta, opinions, industry talk, other games, anything, you can hop on Discord, leave me a voicemail, and I'll answer your questions in a video. Small side note, because I didn't actually know, the easiest way to do that is with Discord Mobile. You click the microphone, and off you go, Bob's your uncle. So if at 3 a.m. you're wondering about something, holla at your boy, and let's have some fun. But now, let's get back to the topic of today, which are shields. So I've started with saying that Watts4Dinner and Protean Cell are the two strongest. And for the purposes of comparisons between these two, we'll exclude AMP, because if you do, I do find that if you get 100% Watts4Dinner AMP, it will just be the strongest that you can get. But if you don't count that, for a one-shot wombo combo, the Cell will take the cake because it will give you 40% shock damage versus 25%. And that's how numbers work, you know? But if you look past the one-shot possibility, Watts4Dinner, for my money, will always eke out the sustained DPS because you can't forget that while you're gonna have to toggle the Cell, you do actually use time that you could be spending seasoning the enemies with your own salt and pepper, aka bullets. However, the question that we're gonna answer is why are these so freaking strong compared to the rest of the options out there? And for that, I'm gonna split the shields into three categories: offensive, defensive, and utility. I'll discuss what's important for me when I'm trying to figure out whether is this shield gonna be S tier of that specific category or not. And of course, I'm gonna give you guys my favorites for each of those so that you can kind of get a sense of where they land or where the one that you're eyeing at lands in the meta. There's a ton of shields out there, quite few of them, doesn't really need to be covered, but hey, you can leave me a voicemail if you want something investigated that you think I left out and I shouldn't have. But either way, we're going to start with the offensive category because that's where the game and the current meta revolves around. I mean, I've talked about this before, right? How we're in a perpetual rat race to kill everything as quickly as possible. I don't like it, but there is a clear reason why this is the case since the bloody stopwatch is coming back next week, so we are back to it again. Now, clearly, the aforementioned two bad boys are going to fall into the offensive category alongside with, you got certain amount of variation. If you want my power ranking, I'm going to pop it up on the screen on the list so that you're going to be able to see it, but I consider the following shields into falling into this one: Watts4Dinner, Protean Cell, Fireworks, Elpis, Sparky, and then extra medium, heavyweight, and kind of on the fence are Cinder, Shelly, and Guardian Angel, but I'm going to pop those two into defensive for a cleaner split, not spit. Well, I mean, you can spit at them, but you probably shouldn't because your monitor is going to be wet. Now, I know that GA specifically is insane if you get AMP. I know, I love it. But you have to get AMP, otherwise it is defensive by nature, so I'm just going to make a little bit of a distinction before, kind of muddying the water. So the first two are the strongest because their damage comes from you. The Shock Rider is calculated off of your final damage. This naturally means that the stronger you get, the higher the damage will be. That little Shock Rider is gonna start packing a punch. For the Firework, the Elpis, the Sparky, those are calculated off of a fixed value that you have unfortunately very little control over. You do have some ways to boost it because they take certain multipliers, like the splash damage applying for Fireworks is an easy example. But to the point, because they got a fixed value, which means that their usefulness rides or dies on how strong that number is versus the relative health pool of the enemies. If you think about it, this is why everyone absolutely loves the Firework shields. You get it nice and early in the game and it's just suddenly gonna chain kill everything around you. Unfortunately, once you're in high UVH and the enemies get many hundreds of % health increase, but the shields, They don't scale past their level 60 values. And this is gonna take another hit when UVHM7 comes, and this is also the reason why all the Nova damaging shield, and to be fair, rep kits also for that matter, are just garbage. Because it doesn't give you any multipliers, or rather, if you can't, it doesn't matter what kind of multipliers you give it, it will never do enough damage right now. It cannot match the power of your soup. And this pattern is going to repeat across every single one of them. For Sparky, its damage also scales with the shield capacity, but outside of that, it's a fixed value. For Elpis, you need to be doing the melee damage so that right away, only really Mantra builds that can make a use of it, and ends up being very mid, and the extra medium is just fucking no. If you want me to bust my own shield, you're either gonna have to give me a massive nuclear explosion or a radius that is wider than the fucking AI data center that Kevin O'Leary wants to build. Fucking wanker. Now, for the heavyweight, it's a bit of an odd duck out there, and that I think doesn't quite have a home in any of the builds due to the fact that, again, really only the Mantra builds can reliably use it, and more importantly, nuking your own shield is really unwise in a world where everyone is throwing fucking grenades at you. Even though you do get 50% melee damage when you're empty, and this can bump up to be 80% if you also get Spunky as a variant, if you have a build that shreds with it, let me know. I don't really find one so far at the moment, but we'll have a look, of course, together. So for this category, and I mean, I'm not gonna be sharing state secrets here. The best ones are gonna be Watts4Dinner, Protean Cell, and Fireworks. Watts4Dinner definitely takes the cake for me if you include AMP into the conversation. It's kind of sad, but that's just how the damage formula works at the moment. But then let's move on over to the defensive category. And I'm gonna start this with the whole problem that we are facing as a Borderlands looter shooter community. You only need defensive options if you don't kill things quick enough. That might very well change in UVHM7, so take it with a pinch of salt. It's coming this Thursday, but right now, if your Jacobs clears the room before you gotta worry about being overwhelmed, you don't really need damage reduction, right? But let's have a look, because there are some interesting options out here. So for me, the ranking of the defensive shields are up on the screen right now, and they're the following: Guardian Angel, Onion, Cinder Shelly, Timekeeper's New Shield, Oak Age Cast, Honey Badger, Pandoran Memento, and Undershield. Now, if you're familiar with these, you know that they are not created equal, not at all. GA has an insanely quick recharge rate and an insanely short recharge delay. Because of that, if you don't get insta-gift, you will survive because your shield is going to be right back up. And if you add AMP into this mix as well, because your blue bot is effectively a fucking yo-yo, you're going to have maximum uptime on the AMP as you can get. Then you have the flat damage reduction shields. So Onion is going to give you immunity. Only 2 seconds, which is not a long time, and I particularly don't enjoy it that much, but it is true immunity, and you really can't scoff at that. Then Cinder Shelly, we are constantly build up towards 50% damage reduction with 2% stacks increments at a time, and once you reach 50%, it will reset with a Nova, but then it starts building back up again. Because of that constant changing of the number, it becomes more situational, and if you have a lot of enemies around you, it's more useful. And Honey Badger is an interesting outlier. And I've talked about this before. It falls into this noob trap issue from my perspective, where if you make a proper build, you're gonna be so strong that nothing can save you from you. And on top of that, once you become familiar with all the different encounters, know where the bosses are coming from, how they're spawning in, and all the kind of things, you're rarely ever gonna do self damage. There is an exception to that, which is uncontrollable weapons like the kick boulder. So it is either very niche or it's the most useful when you're very new to the game. But then you got Timekeeper's New Shield that gives you a solid flat damage reduction, a big old chunk of health, and some good old health regen. This is a staple in a build or two, but realistically you will either need Lifesteal or Siphon to make it work, and if you have that, because those mechanics care with your damage, you would end up out-healing the benefits anyway, so you don't need it for defensive options. The only real reason why you'd want this is if you got talents that will boost your damage based off of your maximum health. I'm looking at you, Vex the Siren. But moving on then to the Oak Aged Cask, which is not a bad idea, but it just refills your shield instantly if you kill an enemy. It works, but you need to kill someone and then run up and then pick up the booster, which is a lot of effort for a very little downside. And then the last two are going to be Pandora Memento and On the Shield. And the problem with these, they're just not needed. Right now, the Pandora Memento would theoretically be the best shield for elemental resistance. But there is just nothing really encounter-wise that comes close to having so much elemental damage in there that you would want to kind of cut it in half. Then for the On the Shield, it's just criminally bad. You get 20% of the capacity as overshield on armor segment break. I mean, the numbers are just fucking laughable. It should be at least 200% at the very least, and even then, probably nobody would use it. So for this category, the best ones are going to be GA, Onion, and Cinder Shelly. The rest are extremely situational right now. But then we got the last category, which is utility. And here, with the exception of Super Soldier and maybe Completion, the rest is shit. I mean, you got the Hoarder Principle and Hopscotch. Compare this. The Super Soldier is going to give you 25% fire rate, 25% move speed, and 1 ammo per second. These are universally solid buffs for anyone, especially because of where the fire rate sits in the damage formula. Then for Completion, the trick here is that you will always get an ever resetting buff automatically because the top segment will disappear if you get enough fix like the bladed, the spunky, or heavy plating, you can get gun damage, overall damage, or just damage reduction, which are solid buffs all around. The problem here is that this is much better in a controlled environment than in the real world scenario, because out there you're actually going to be taking some random fucking damage that might delay or completely stop you from being able to regenerate your shield. And if that happens, then the gap just widens between the best two to a really big, really big standard. Now for the rest, I mean, let's fucking go through it for shits and giggles, but the Hoarder is going to give you an ammo booster on kill that you gotta run and take. Okay, nothing impressive. The Principal is gonna summon a Shield Boy. That could be good, but I think it's a miscalculation. My biggest issue with this one is that you gotta use it like a mobile cover when I think what it should be doing is it should be acting like a fucking savage point guard and just going in front of the enemies and just blocking everything that it can. And for the Hopscotch, it's just weak. I like the idea of having a singularity pulling in the enemies. However, with many other things, the execution is just weak. If they buff the singularity to be 10 times the size, I might like it a little bit more, but even then you'd have to give up a lot. So for this category, if you want the utility, just get the Super Soldier, which is really, I mean, more offensive than anything. So yeah, now let's keep it in utility because it gives you the 1 ammo per second. Yeah, we got that. But as you can see, here's the problem. You need to fundamentally make a willing sacrifice to use anything else other than the metal. And that just doesn't really make any sense. But let me know what you think about the state of the shields at the moment. Link to the voicemails are going to be in the description. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.